Hello, my name is Dr. Philip Zerrillo, and I'm the Executive Director of Postgraduate Programs here at Singapore Management University. And today I have with me a very special guest. I have the valedictorian of our MBA class in 2011, Mr. Sander Bogdan.
Yeah.
Sander, you know, first of all, I want to say congratulations to you.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor and a real privilege to be part of the program, so I appreciate it.
Great. You know, Sander, you come to us from America, right? And you're one of our first American students to come here to Singapore Management University. And let me just ask you, I mean, first of all, how did you find this place?
It's actually an interesting story. I knew that I wanted to attend university in Asia, and I wanted to go to Asia actually to pursue my business degree, because a lot of the Western schools tend to focus more on a Western education as far as businesses go, and they also tend to study Western businesses in depth. Recognizing that I wanted to get a more global business education, I thought the best place to do that would probably be in Asia, where you have both Western businesses that have come and set up, but also a lot of local businesses here that are growing and developing as well. Then, once I started looking around Asia, the question really became, do I want to go to school in a place like China, or do I want to go to school in a place like India? Or, there's various universities in the region that offer great programs. But I ultimately settled on Singapore, and part of it was through recommendations from friends, but part of it was also as a result of recognizing that if I chose to attend school in a place like China, I would probably get a more Chinese-oriented education. We may study Western businesses, but the mindset's going to be, and the structure will probably be more Chinese-oriented. Similarly, as I was looking at schools in India, I also noticed that Indian schools they studied Western businesses, but they also, when they looked east, they tended to focus on, more domestic type businesses and business education. Singapore is really unique in the respect that it's really the crossroads for Asia. So you have, folks who come from China, folks who come from India, and folks actually from the Southeast Asian region. So the education here, if you really want to get a truly Asian education, is balanced for the region. And then you couple that with the British history of the country and kind of the Western influence, and it's a great place just to kind of get a view of both worlds and to get it thoroughly.
Well, that's an interesting, kind of an interesting synopsis of, what makes Asia such a, an intriguing destination, is that it is truly the crossroads of Asia. So let me ask you, what were some of the other factors that went into the decision of, why Singapore Management University, and being that you'd kind of narrowed it down to Singapore or someplace that was more of a crossroads destination? What was it?
SMU is a great school for a number of reasons. I think if you look at some of the other schools in the region, they tend to be a little bit more regiment, and they have a more, I don't want to say that, the British education system has been in place for a while, and so the way that they conduct their business education, I didn't feel was as interactive as the education that we have here at SMU, and that was one thing that really caught my eye. The other thing is the quality of faculty here is just exceptional, and when you couple that with the size of the program, which tends to be a smaller, more intimate program, you not only get a great education in terms of SMU's faculty and the experience they can bring to the classroom, because many of them are also come from industry. But you also get the opportunity to interact with them, like I'm interacting with you right now, because I had you for a couple courses, at a much more personal level.
Sure.
And, education, as far as it being reading cases and writing reports, is one thing. But education, as far as being able to leverage the experience and history and personal relationships that you have with people who really understand the subjects, is a completely different thing. And I think that latter point really separates SMU from the rest of the academic environments here.
If you were talking to another American student, say abroad, who was considering where to go for their MBA, and they were looking at schools in the United States, schools maybe in Europe. You know, what would you tell them about coming out here to Singapore Management University?
So, you know, if you're going to study in the West, and there's nothing wrong with studying in the West. You know, it's a great place. I mean, I come from there.
I studied a bit there.
You studied there as well, and you know,
and taught a few.
I lived in Europe for a short while as well. I lived in Switzerland for about a year and a half, and you know, they're great places to see what's going on from a Western standpoint. But you know, if you want a really global business education, and you know, business today is not. I mean, there are very few businesses, maybe 50 years ago, that you could explicitly just focus on domestic type,
Yep.
you know, business and succeed there. But you know, even small and medium businesses today, doesn't matter where they're located in the world, they increasingly have an international focus, or they at least need to be internationally aware.
Yeah.
And so the benefit of coming to a university like this is it really brings that international awareness to the fore. So I think that for me, and I think for American students in general, North American students or European students in general, it's really important to have a well-balanced business education, I think, to be successful in today's business environment.
So, Sander, you know, you came to school over here, and you know, one of the really interesting things about yourself that I didn't know before this, you know, before I was told that you were the valedictorian of the class, is that you had never actually looked at your grades, and you didn't even know what your grade point average was until the middle of November, in the middle of your kind of last semester here. And I really want to congratulate you for that, because, you know, as an academic, that is truly learning for the benefit of learning, right? Not trying to make a grade and trying to manage your grade point average, but you really just went out and you took your classes, you earned your degree, and you obviously have excelled. And I want to ask, you know, what was it that, you know, was it difficult for you to go to school here? I mean, were there problems with the languages or the instructor and communicating with your instructors or anything like that? And when you began to interact with your classmates, were there any insights that you got about Asia that maybe you didn't have before?
Right. Great question. So as far as there being challenges in the classroom, there were no challenges. I mean, I think one thing that maybe a lot of people don't necessarily recognize is that Singapore is an English-speaking country first and foremost. So coming here and having access to and being able to kind of communicate with people, and even having access to the comforts, you know, what we consider to be comforts in the West, like your favorite cereal or your favorite foods. These are things that are available in a place like Singapore. So my move here, believe it or not, was actually easier than my move to Europe. Just by virtue of the availability of things I was comfortable with and kind of the language. And that extends into the classroom as well. I mean, many of the professors here have worked in both hemispheres. And, you know, they're fluent in English, and they're fluent in business practices in both parts of the world. And so really, the challenges were more the subject matter than they were actually making sure I understood what was going on in the classroom. Okay. And that was great because it really enabled me to focus on, you know, learning and not having to worry about kind of adapting. Now that said, it's not that there wasn't any adaptation that took place. You know, I think you had asked this latter question of, you know, is there anything I learned about the students here? And, you know, one of the somewhat easily deceiving aspects of Singapore, but in a positive way, is that because on the surface it appears, you know, to a degree Western, and people speak a similar language, it's English, so that everything else is the same. But when you start to dig in, you realize you get this whole different viewpoint about you know, people's values and how they view teamwork and in terms of communicating and standing up for issues and leadership. And so when you ask about things I learned, man, I really learned a lot about, you know, a lot of little nuances in terms of, you know, what people's values were and how that influenced their decisions, right? And the place where you really see this come to the fore is some of the group assignments that we have in class, because, you know, I had come in with a more Western approach to kind of doing things, and folks bring, you know, their own approach, and when you say Eastern, it's actually a mix. I mean, it's a combination of China and India and Southeast Asia, and there's some interesting dynamics there as well. And so you really have to learn to broaden your perspective to take all of other people's perspectives into account, and also humble yourself to be open to those new ideas and new ways of doing things.
You know, you went to an international school for your undergraduate, and I know that you were an engineering major at one of the top universities back in the United States. And many of your classmates were from foreign countries. And we always think, wow, I got so internationalized because I had international classmates. Right. What's the difference between being immersed and having your boots on the ground?
This is a great question. And this is something that I've, that my family has actually asked me as well. So it's a very, very relevant question. Lots of people are interested in it. And the thing is, I thought, because I had worked at, I had 10 years of work experience, and I worked with a highly international crowd, and I also went to an international school, as you note, that I had international experience, But the thing you don't realize is that when people come to the United States, they, or any other country, they come with an open mind. Yep. And they may not be willing to share, always willing to share their viewpoints, or you may not see them as they really are, because they're acclimating to a new environment.
Sure.
So you'll get some of it, and you'll get some of their viewpoints, but really what you get is kind of somebody who's open-minded and trying to adapt. The difference here is you're now in that position. And for me, I'm the person that has to come in and really be open-minded and adapt myself to the local environment. But you also see raw views that people have about the region, the state of the region, how things operate here, and individuals' malleability in terms of being able to change their styles or willing to change their styles is different. People are much more energetic about Asia and the opportunities here than they are kind of about another country which they'd be acclimating to.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Even in my own career, I've been spending 100 to 150 days in Asia for over a decade.
Wow.
And it was the sort of thing for me, I found it really improved my teaching ability, and it improved my ability to connect with students back in the classroom at my previous universities, the University of Texas and Northwestern University. I was able to talk to students because I had that depth of experience. So, I kind of hear what you're saying there in terms of, getting over here and experiencing them, not in a foreign place where they might be a bit reserved to really show you what their culture is about, but being able to do it abroad.
And the value can't be understated. Yeah. I mean, I've noticed myself when I've traveled around, and especially when I am interacting with some of the locals here in the business, that I've just become much more adept at that. And that's something you really can't learn in a classroom,
sure,
where you're sitting with students who are international students and you're studying international business.
Yep.
I mean, the ideal situation is one where you're actually there. And, there's a great example where within my first month here, I was taking an accounting class with one of our professors, and he had written a book about the finance, basically inclusive of financial statements, but predominantly focused on Asian businesses. And one of the businesses in there was a company called Bread Talk, which is a local company. And I remember studying it, and it was kind of different. It was, I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, interesting, unique company. And we talked about it. But, the benefit was, as I left the building, I had never heard of this company before I came to Singapore. I just walked down to the mall, and I was able to actually see that business in motion. And, the business operates to a degree sufficiently different enough than what we see in the West that just studying it isn't sufficient. You really got to be on the ground and see it firsthand.
Yeah. I got to say, in our case writing initiative here at the university, this is what we're trying to do, is produce more of these cases that people will be able to visually see and experience here in this region. Well, let me ask you, you mentioned something too, that you were able to just walk out of the classroom door and see the Toast Box facility. Singapore Management University is located in the Central Business District. Do you see that as an advantage to?
I do. And the thing is, you may not, it's not something explicit. I mean, I know when I had first come here, you and I had a conversation about this. I kind of questioned the value of, a university being in the city versus a university maybe being a little outside the city, and there's really any difference. Sure. But there is a real difference, and it's actually quite valuable. I mean, what you get is you get the opportunity to kind of see the the lifeblood of the city and how business operates firsthand. You know, and again, it's the classroom versus being there experience. But it's not even a matter of seeing it. You hear it. You hear the types of conversations that people have. You know, you'll be sitting at a Starbucks locally, which is, you know, located very close to campus, and you can hear conversations taking place. And so you're really ingrained with kind of what's happening within the city, and you get I think, a much deeper exposure to, and a much broader exposure to the business environment in Asia.
So, you know, you've told me about Temit Suardi's case on Toastbox, and you know, I know that you sat through my class, but tell me about just a tremendous learning experience that you had the opportunity to witness that you don't think you could have gotten somewhere else.
There's actually a great example. One of the classes that's taught here at SMU, which I think you're aware of, which is International Economics. It's taught by this Professor Augustine Tan. And
what a legend.
Yeah, he is a legend. I mean, and that's the thing, right? I mean, here's an individual who basically lived through the development of this country. And, you know, there's not, you know, when you look at the history of the world right now, there's very few countries that have come about in the last 50 years. But Singapore is one of those countries. Mm-hmm. And the transition that the country has made in the last 50 years from basically being, you know, rickshaws, dirt roads, and a naval port, you know, for the British, maybe even longer, 60 years, to what it is today, which is, you know, one of the, I think it's the Lion City, they usually refer to it as one of the Asian tigers, is amazing. And someone like Augustine Tan, who was here during that time and not only witnessed it, but was part of it, because he was also a member of Parliament here, particularly on the economic side, you not only, you know, get to hear about the stories about, you know, what happened and what you saw and what the consequences are, but he can share with you insights about why it happened, what some of the thinking was. Mm-hmm. And man, having insight into how a nation was built and why the economic policies were set the way they were is something that is really, really hard to get. I mean, that class to me made a substantial impression in terms of on how business really operates and how countries, you know, the role of kind of government and business.
Yeah. You know, I'll tell you, I've had an opportunity to work with government leaders around the world at different stages of my career. And I know that whenever Augustine Tan is speaking, I make it a point to make sure that I hear it, because it's incredible. It's an incredible experience.
You can't find somebody like that somewhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, he's really great.
Well, you know, I mean, just as one kind of final question to you, if you were, you know, saying, you know, top 5 things that you liked about coming here to Singapore Management University, or for somebody out in the West who is thinking about you know, potentially coming here, or somebody from Europe who's thinking of coming here to Singapore Management University, what would you say are the magnets, the draws to coming to this place?
I would say that, you know, the top 5 things that somebody who's interested in coming to this region, or even if they're not, should really consider in terms of not only coming to the region, but coming to a school like SMU, that I think are really important are, number 1, the balanced business education. You know, business is global. Yeah. If you're doing local business, you know, you're selling bananas or apples. I mean, but even that's become an international business, right? So if you want to get a great, balanced, international, truly international business education, this is a great place to do it. The whole program's taught in English, so it's, you know, you can really focus on the education. You don't have to focus on kind of some of the cultural and language barriers. That's the first one. The second item I would say is the quality of faculty at this school cannot be understated. I mean, on average, I would say that the faculty is good. Often, it's great to excellent. I mean, and there's no average. I can't say any of the professors here have been, you know, not good. And I'm not, you know, just saying that. I mean, I truly mean it in my heart. Yeah. The professors here have been really great. So they've done a great job in terms of selecting the faculty. And when you couple that again with the small class size, I mean, it's just, you know, or the smaller class size, it really creates an intimate learning opportunity that that's hard to replicate somewhere else. And in terms of dealing with some of the nuances of this this global business environment, you really need that intimate type relationship, because it takes time to understand some of these things, especially when you don't have local context. The fourth item is the facilities here are really state-of-the-art. It's a young school, but I think to a degree that actually works in its favor. You know, we have Wi-Fi, we've got the dual projectors and the presentation at the front of the room. I mean, everything is modern. It's all taken care of.
Sure.
And so that's important for kind of streamlining, I think, the education. And I would say the final thing is the students. You know, the school does an excellent job of not only taking people who I think are excellent, taking in, I should say, people who are not only academically strong, but people who are well-rounded individuals. As you know, in our class, we have English majors, we have people who work in publishing, we have people who work in oil, and they bring this not only this wealth of backgrounds to the classroom, but they also come from places like South Korea, Indonesia, Malaysia, you know, India, China, and so you really get exposure to the region, I think, in general, and you know, having the opportunity to interact with those folks and learn with these classmates, particularly in light of this question you asked earlier about people just really being themselves and sharing their raw opinion is something you really can't place money on.